Hello, fellow modelers. It's Bruce here. Well, it's time for some track ballasting, and I thought I would do a more complete video than some of the ones I've done in the past. HO scale track. Let's start with some materials and tools that I'll be using. A long time ago, I settled down to a type of ballast that I was going to use. So it's the Woodland Scenics ballast, and in particular a mixture of their gray and their buff, and the ratio is 3 grays to 1 buff, and I have continued to use that, and I'm happy with it. I believe the first person I saw who mentioned that ratio was George Celios. I could be wrong, but I was watching a video where he was being interviewed, and I believe that was his mixture. So that's the actual ballast. Other materials, once the ballast is spread out, and I'll show you how I do that. To hold it down, I'm going to first drench it with some wet water. Wet water is water that either has isopropyl alcohol mixed in or has some drops of dishwasher liquid in. I prefer the alcohol. And so I start with, since I'm going to dilute it anyway, I start with the 70% alcohol, and then I have diluted it by cutting it in a third. So I put about a third of the jar is the alcohol, 2/3 is water. So it's just enough alcohol in there to act as a wetting agent. And I'll start by wetting down all the ballast with that. And then I come back, and my glue agent is diluted white glue. I use plain Elmer's white glue, 50-50 mix of Elmer's and water, so it's quite runny. And let's see, what other tools do I have? For spreading the ballast, I will start by using just a regular plastic spoon to dribble some between the rails. And then in spreading it out, I use, and this is the trick, I use a paint edger, and they come in a variety of sizes, and you pick the size that is appropriate for your scale. In my case, it's about 1 inch across, and that fits very nicely running across the top of the rails and running it this way to spread the ballast and clean off the top of the ties. Okay, so that's that tool. For tidying up edges, I have a sponge paintbrush that I can come through and tidy up edges with, evening them out. If there's any ballast left on top of the ties, I can come in with a stiff brush and just individually knock those off. And then finally, I have a pipette here that you can get bulk on eBay nowadays. Back in the day, I got them from Model Power. But I will use that to apply the wet water and the diluted white glue. So that's it as far as supplies is concerned and tools, and I will come back shortly when I start spreading the ballast and show you how I do that. Talk to you again soon. Okay, I've started putting some ballast down, and there you can see how it looks. I'm going to show you in a second. I'll put some down where I haven't done it yet, but first I come through with the edger in the wide one, which takes care of grooming the sides of the cork roadbed and distributes it quite nicely. And then I come through and just am trying to clean off the railroad ties between the rails. And you can see that when you're done, they are pretty well cleaned off. And if you take a little bit of time on that, you won't have to be picking any other ballast off of the top of the ties. All right, now let me back out a little bit and show you how I go about putting the ballast down. Okay, so just using the plastic spoon, I start by putting some ballast between the rails, and then I come through and put some on the outside. Okay, now you come through and I use it sideways, Broadway down anyway, to spread it and get it I'm tilting it a little bit to groom the sides. And I'll come through now and clean off between. And you can see here, right here, I need a little bit more because the cork roadbed is showing. And so I'll put a little bit more on both sides here. Okay, and some more tidying up. I don't want to get any ballast here where I have to add to the trackage. Usually I stay back a little bit further than that, but that should suffice. And that grooming looks pretty good. Okay. Alrighty, that suffices, and now I will start with the wet water and the white glue, and I'll come back in a second and show you how I do that. Talk to you again soon. Okay, first we're going to drench the ballast with the wet water, which again is my 70% isopropyl alcohol diluted 3-to-1 with plain water. And here's where a little bit of patience really pays off, because you don't want to be washing your ballast away or making it float on top of the ties. So you just put the pipette right on one of the ties and just start squeezing slowly, letting it soak in. And you know when you have enough when you see the wet water run out onto the surrounding scenery. I've already mentioned that I like to put down some scenery on either side of the roadbed before I put down the ballast, so that the ballast rolls on top of, in this case, the grass. And you notice I didn't worry about doing a lot of scenery beyond just the roadbed. And if you see what I'm doing, you can see it actually soaking in right through to the bottom until it comes out. And you want that to happen because you want your white glue in a few minutes to also soak all the way down to the cork road bed. Okay, let me move this way a little bit. Yeah, sometimes you lose patience and you give it a good squirt and then you realize you just created a headache for yourself because the ballast came up and floated on top of the ties. So just, hey, it's not a race. No, I could be doing something silly like watching television. Actually, you could have some music on in the background or even a ball game, I guess, while you're doing this. I think you can see this coming out the bottom now. I can see areas where it hasn't yet soaked all the way out. All right, so that's this application. I'm going to just finish this up and then I'll come back and show you the white glue. Talk to you. Okay, now we're coming back and picking up some white glue. And we are applying it the same way. Put it down first through the middle. Okay, now this will slowly soak in. And you don't want to really disturb the ballast, but I will come back with a damp cloth and just run it across the top of the rails. Get that glue off of the rails before it sets. You can still get it off after it sets with some warm water, but better to do it while it's nice and wet. All right. Alrighty, I'm going to finish this up and we'll take a look at it after it's dried up a bit, and I'll give you some tips for how to ballast around turnouts, and that'll be it for this video. Alright, talk to you again soon. Okay, time for another update. This is the next day now that after I drenched this with diluted white glue. You can see that it's all been absorbed. There's nothing showing on top of the ties. The grass. I guess it's been discolored a little bit, but not noticeable. I can go over it with some very thin white glue and sprinkle some more on top of that if I wish. But overall, came pretty good. Next up over here is a section now that I have groomed the ballast using that paint edger, as I showed you, and it's ready for first the wet water, the alcohol and water mix, and then the diluted white glue. But what I wanted to show you was that we've now come up to a turnout. And ballasting around turnouts can give people some fits, I guess. Certainly you have to be careful around certain things within a turnout, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'll tell you how bad just the idea of doing this can become. On my layout back in New Jersey, I had a double crossover, and everything, I ballasted all the track coming into all four parts of the double crossover and stopped right at the edge of that unit. And that was unballasted for about 3 or 4 years. You look at all the photos, everything was ballasted except for that. Even all the other turnouts had been done. But that one loomed larger than life. When I rolled up my sleeves and did it, it took, of course, probably about an hour altogether, and it was done. You just have to, as I said, be careful. Let's look at some things to be cautious about. Let me swing this over here, and we will look at the frog and the guardrails. Okay, so on a commercial one like this, the guardrails and mine are plastic. This is a Pico turnout. So here's one guardrail. There's another guardrail. And of course, one of the things you want to make sure is that you don't get any ballast between the rail and the guardrail, because that's where the flange of the wheels on your rolling stock go. When you're putting it down dry, before you even consider wet water and so forth, just make sure if you see even one speck of ballast in there that you take some tool. Toothpick works great in HO scale. You can use a knife blade. You can use in larger scales something like this skewer. But just make sure there's nothing in there before you continue with your wet water. The same thing is true around the frog, because so this is set right now to come straight through, and the flange on the wheel is going to be riding right along the inside here, and then when it gets to the frog, it's going to continue over here. So you don't want anything. This is a plastic frog piece here. You don't want anything in there either, so clean those out. The last part to be concerned about is by the points. And when it comes to switch points, let's just look at these a minute. Of course, they have to be able to swivel back and forth. So here they are for going into the siding. Here they are to go straight through. You absolutely cannot have any ballast between the point and the rail that it's the stock rail that it's going to close against. So nothing in here. And you can see that continues for quite a ways. As a matter of fact, I would say from their pivot point, just all the way back to the throw bar, I would not have any ballast other than a little bit in the center of here, which you still have to be careful of, because when you flip it, the point comes all the way to here. So you look at that. You can even mark it with a pencil if you want, just to mark a line where the points will come to. Just be very careful. If you put anything in there, make it very low, below the tops of the ties. And then once you have the dry stuff in there, flip it back and forth a few times and make sure that nothing is interfering with it. So I'm going to do that and show you that in a minute. But the other tip is once you get your ballast spread out into the turnout, and before you add your white glue. What I do is put a drop. Let me just blow this up again so you can see the points that I'm talking about. That is, the areas that I'm talking about. I'm talking about where the switch points pivot. So they're pivoting right here, here, and here. And what I will do is I'll come in with a drop of very thin oil and put it right on top of that joint and hinge, if you will, the pivot point on both sides. And what kind of oil you use, it can be 3-in-1 oil. You can just kind of put one drop. You can, the electric razor oil, I forget the name of it right now, mineral oil, just a drop. Okay, and what that'll do is help keep the diluted white glue from adhering to those spots there. And even if you do that, once you put your glue down, and I'm very careful around these spots where I let the glue go, make sure that, once again, maybe every 15 minutes, every half hour after you put it on, probably 15 minutes, come in and just flip these back and forth and make sure they're not getting glued in place. Alrighty, that's the tips. Now I will actually go about adding the ballast there, so I'll be back in a... Okay, let me start between the points here. And again, less is better here, all right? Because you can always add more if you needed to, but unless you take a vacuum cleaner, it's hard to come in and get some out. And on the outside of the rails, I can be more generous. All right, let me just look here again and make sure. And I'm going to put some in here. And then the outside here. I didn't want to get any in there. Let me just get a brush and get that out of there a minute. Yeah, do all of this while it's still dry, that's for sure. And all right, I'll come back in a little while. When you get older, your hands shake like a son of a gun, folks. Get ready for it. Alrighty, so again, I'm going to start with the paint edger. If you have any OCD tendencies, this is where they'll probably come out and show themselves. It's like, when have I done enough grooming? Is there ever enough? Trying to get everything off the top of the ties, both between the rails and beyond the rails. Now you can see I have, with my shakes, made a mess here, but that paint edger is your friend. You know, just take a little extra time. Just take a little extra time. All right, I see a spot where cork is showing right here. Oh, for goodness sakes. All right. Okay, folks, I think that's ready for the wet water and then the diluted white glue. And I will be very careful when I dribble it in. I'll try to dribble it from a ways back here and let it flow towards where the points are pivoting. And, stay away from all these things here that I don't want to get glued in place to the degree that I can. Alrighty, we'll come back and look at what it looks like when it's done. Talk to you then. Alrighty, just some last comments. At this point, this is about 2 hours later. All of the diluted glue has settled in, and I have come down and every once in a while just moved the points back and forth. And they're working fine and riding above anything that's still wet. So at this point, I feel comfortable that this will continue to work. I'll let it dry overnight, and then I still have another 2 feet of track here and one more turnout to ballast, and then the Bangor slate branch will be fully ballasted. So, okay, hope you enjoyed the video. You can see that ballasting is not always fun, but it's not all that difficult a task. You have to have some patience, and by far the tool to rely on is a paint edger similar to this one. And again, I want to say that this tip came my way from a member of the Railroad Line Forum, and I'll be forever grateful to Tim for giving me the tip, because it's been a lifesaver. Alrighty, as always, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. And we'll talk to you again soon.